Hello and welcome to this catch-up call. We had a North America and Europe AI workshop earlier this week, and we'll be recapping some of the key points here. Before we get started, I want to show the antitrust policy notice as usual. The full Linux Foundation antitrust policy can be found on the Linux Foundation website. And if you're from a member company, you can ask questions of our counsel, Andy Updegrove. Now, moving on, we have a pretty clear agenda for today. We're going to recap the Europe and North America meeting that just happened 2 days ago. We'll have some space for discussion around the meeting outcomes. We'll have some space for any other business, and then we will close this meeting. I expect our total time to be around 30 minutes today. Now, to recap the meeting that occurred for Europe and North America, there were three main topics. One was a presentation from the Fujitsu team on AI and copyright compliance matters. The second item was a brief introduction from OSI on their feature-complete open source AI definition. Now, feature-complete does not mean released. It means they have a complete document and they're soliciting feedback. Then there was a detailed discussion about how ISO IEC 5230, the international standard for open source license compliance, how that maps to and how it does not map to concerns about AI compliance. In other words, looking at the ISO standard for open source license compliance, how can it potentially help us think about AI compliance? Now we're going to dig into all three of those items a little more. But I did want to just start by telling you that the conclusion of the Europe-North America meeting was that the participants decided to begin to explore principles for AI compliance in certain areas at the next meeting. In other words, to take all the feedback and all the information and to try to think what principles can be used. Now, I wanted to discuss a little more about each of the topics I highlighted a moment ago. I recommend that if you're watching this call or if you're on the call, you consider reviewing the entire recording of the AI meeting. That has been placed in the chat. It can also be found on the OpenChain website. The recording has, you can see at the bottom of the screenshot, time codes to jump to key parts, like the Fujitsu presentation, but especially the detailed Q&A around that presentation, the full discussion and Q&A around the OSI open source AI definition. There was some good feedback there. And also the detailed dive into AI compliance and the relevance, the use of ISO 5230 in helping us think about that. Now, because they are short, I'm going to play the Fujitsu presentation, not the Q&A, just the presentation. It's about, I think, 7 minutes. And then I will play the presentation by the executive director of OSI on their open source AI definition. And that one, oh, that's about 7 minutes. Fujitsu one, my apologies, is about 4 minutes. And then the OSI one is about 7. Let's get started with the Fujitsu presentation, have a quick look at that, and then, as I said, you can go and check out the full Q&A, all of the other material on the previous meeting recording. I'm going to play this, and I would appreciate if someone in the chat would just confirm that the audio is okay. So let's get started. I'm going to play.
Hello there. Thank you very much for attending my session. I'm Masaki from Fujitsu, and I'm currently exploring the application of generative AI.
Oh, my apologies. I went full screen and it stopped playing. Let's restart that.
Hello there. Thank you very much for attending my session. I'm Masaki from Fujitsu, and I'm currently exploring the application of generative AI in software development. One of my biggest concerns in this process is the risk of copyright infringement. Therefore, I'd like to discuss how you all are handling issues related to copyright infringement, such as the following, like in this slide. Do you have sufficient measures against the risk of copyright infringement by using generative AI? For example, the conditions for incorporating code developed with help by generative AI into OSS or product. How to minimize the risk of copyright infringement by code developed with help by generative AI. And effectiveness of marking to later identify code with help by AI, like that. In my opinion, the risks other than the copyright issues can be sufficiently mitigated by existing methods such as test, review, and applying tools like SCA. However, regarding copyright issues, while there are several measures available, it remains unclear whether these are sufficient to significantly reduce the risk. This diagram organizes the general relationship between the amount of input information, the x-axis, and the amount of output code, the y-axis. When we classify in this way, the only area that can be said to be almost certainly without problems is the bottom navy area, which is the very limited case. So, while there is a tendency to need more caution as we move to the upper left, this area, this does not necessarily means that the risk is sufficiently low in other cases. Not safe, I think. This slide shows an example of guideline for making it as clear as possible that there is no similarity of code to existing code. However, as many of you may have noticed, almost all of the tasks from number 1 to number 4 here, almost all of the tasks depends on human developer. So I believe it would be desirable to automate these tasks further. I guess this must be very difficult right now. The remaining 2 pages illustrate the relatively safe or risky usage methods, as well as characteristics of relatively safe or risk code as part of a guideline for developers. This page shows the relatively safe or risky use, and the next page shows the patterns of relatively safe or risky codes. I don't read all of them. Finally, I'll display the first slide again. I'd appreciate hearing your thoughts and measures regarding the risk of copyright infringement by using generative AI for coding. Thank you.
So a very short presentation, and there's a lot of material in the Q&A after this. The Q&A runs for about 30 minutes and it contains a bunch of other material, including an expansion on the topic and further illustration of how OpenChain might assist, provided by Oseki-san. And Osaki-san covered this very well, and I highly recommend checking out the full recording with that and with the Q&A with people like Jimmy Alberg and Dave Marr discussing further. I will just make a quick note that the discussion of copyright using generative AI in this context is very interesting. Recently, people have been spending a lot of time talking about the copyright of data sets, and that is an important topic. But the question of how to manage the outcomes of AI, the copyright in code developed by or assisted by AI is a significant concern in the supply chain. Right. That's a really good topic to have opened, and it is a topic that no doubt will help inform next steps. As Osaki-san pointed out when we were covering it, OpenChain's job is not to go down into the details of specific measures, specific licenses, and so on. But perhaps in this work group and in this space, we can contribute to high-level knowledge here. Osaki-san, do you think that is a fair summary of the discussion?
Yes, thank you very much. And if you if can I can just share the screen
Sure.
that I shared the content in, okay, this moment.
So Osaki-san had some very useful slides on this topic as well. And, it was something that provoked additional discussion.
Yes, this is an additional slide that now I just presented during the Q1 session that Shane said, and Jimmy and the Dave and the other person that just made a comment about the Fujitsu's proposal. And as Shane says that there's just
Oh, sorry, Osaki-san, one
correspondence.
moment. I can't see the slide. Can everyone else see it?
Oh, really?
No, I don't see
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Oh, there we go. Got it now. Perfect. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Can you, okay. So, yeah. This is a presentation that this is on this slide, and just to illustrate it that the correspondence between the open chain and generative AI copyright issue. And as Shane briefly summarized, that the good thing about the open chain is that the good level of abstraction is just made by the MACDC of the Wind River, and it's not going deep into the industry specific and international internal processes or just individual licensing. And also just simple and clear terms are just made. And so the goal will be just the trust over supply chain. And for generative AI copyright issue, there's many things to consider, and there's just ongoing things about the laws and the rules. And the United States is a fair use and extraterritorial thing, and so we are not, our proposal is not just finding the sole resolution, but just sharing and fostering the good practice with the companies. And this is a very good place and for just cooperating with this kind of thing. And so the copyright issue on generative AI be just good topic on AI study group. And so this will be the just white blank space of this. And also the good thing is that the different forms of OSS license the generative AI providers having just a big power, and also just it's like a reason that not like data's origin, that's the related thing. And so if we just cooperate by AI study group, there will be enough power for requiring the generative AI providers. Yeah, that's a brief explanation that the additional slide that I made. Thank you very much for that, Shane. Yeah.
Thank you, Osaki-san. And, I think we'll be able to discuss these things more and get more feedback on this as the work group progresses. Now, I'm going to bring back my screen. Yeah, here we go. So we're going to have a quick look now at the OSI side of things.
Hello there. Thank you very much for attending.
Oops.
Hello.
There we go. We're going to have a look at the OSI side of things. We're going to hear about their open source AI definition. In case you don't know about this, OSI has been working with industry stakeholders to discuss what might be a good definition for open source AI. Their mental model is somewhat similar to the way that they defined open source in 1998. This is a different question to what we're looking at in general. We're thinking about AI compliance in the supply chain. We're not thinking about defining it. We're not drawing a line between open and closed AI per se. We're looking at the big picture of AI compliance in the supply chain. But it is very important to have awareness of what other people are doing, perhaps at a higher level, or perhaps at a lower level, or perhaps at a level beside us, so that we get a full picture of this fast-moving market. Now, Stefano Maffulli, the executive director of OSI, wanted to talk a little bit about where they are with their open source AI definition, and this information might be useful for you and your company because it's a quick summary of a much larger discussion that happened over, I think, more than a year. Anyway, here is the recording.
We have Steph from OSI here, and there's some news on, well, I won't spoil the news. Steph, do you want to, talk about the OSI news?
Sure, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that we have made a lot of progress in the past months since the last time I presented at the OpenChain group, that the open source AI definition has reached a stage where it's now feature complete, which means that we have in the draft document, we have all the elements to evaluate the existing AI systems and see if they comply or not. So I'd like to have all of you, to join the effort to grab basically one of the existing AI systems and go through the definition draft to see if it really matches your expectations. Tying to the conversation before about provenance, for example, the definition open source AI puts lots of emphasis on having availability of information for where the data was coming from, where the scope and characteristics of how the training data was assembled, its provenance, labeling procedures, if there were any, and that exactly to go into finding a little bit of a balance between knowing what went into the training set without necessarily having to impose the mandatory distribution of that data, since distribution of data gets into complicated territories when it comes to intellectual property management, privacy management, and other issues. We found this balance by requiring a lot of detailed information about the data itself, not necessarily the original data set. So I really encourage you to check the definition, the draft definition, because in the next few weeks, we would really like, in absence of major concerns and major issues discovered, we'd really love to move forward with calling a release candidate, and through the summer go on a very large worldwide tour to present it in multiple places to gather more support and announce a stable version by the end of October. If you have any questions and curiosities, I'm available directly. I'm on the study group mailing list, and of course, privately or in public on the forums maintained by the OSI.
Thanks, Steph. And you put a link in the chat, is that right? Do you want to open that up and share anything there?
I can share, yes, I can share the link to the discussions and the instructions for the validation phase on the chat.
Thanks, Steph. So action to all to review that OSI document and provide comments soon, and reach out to Steph if there's anything particular that you'd like to discuss.
Thank you.
Hey, I've got an initial couple questions, Steph. Yeah, I don't know if this is a good time to ask it, but maybe just at a high level. I noticed that there's a couple elements in there that are, I would say, unconventional relative to the industry practice today. One is like, all the code necessary for duplicating the training. I mean, aside from the data sets, all the like data pre-processing, any special scripts, I assume, necessary to parse that data. Do you know of any models today that are out there, any well-known models that are out there today that are adhering to this proposed standard, if it were up today?
That's what we're trying to find out. I know of a couple. One is Pythia and StarCoder. I mean, the ones from Big Science. They have those elements. There is another one from a group called. They have a paper called LLM 360. They also share a lot of that information. But I agree with you. It's one of those places where we probably should pay a little bit more attention. It's one of those who might expose some surprises.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. Thanks. I'll take a look. And then another quick one. We see licenses like the Open Rail license, and then sort of folks who add responsible AI terms on top of existing open source licenses. How would you see that fitting within the framework of OSI approved licenses for model architecture?
Yeah, I don't think they will. And in fact, it's really complicated. We're really working. I'm really pushing the OSI board to write a comprehensive review of why those licenses would fail, and be a little bit more specific, trying to argue more concretely about why diverse legislations or over time, or the enforcement, even in practical terms, is difficult, complicated, if even possible. But I think that those licenses will. Well, I'm quite sure those licenses will fail the definition.
Okay. All right. thanks for those quick responses. I'm going to definitely look at this in more detail. It's certainly very interesting and good for us to be aware of.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Just picking up on Dave's point, I think that review of why things would fail by the board, I think that would be quite helpful and informative for the community.
So that is the AI definition overview from OSI. Now, I played more of that than I did of our, I'll put it, internal stuff. And that's because it's a different topic to our normal. And I wanted you to get the full picture in case you're not familiar. But just like the presentation from Fujitsu, I recommend you go and potentially listen to that in its entirety as well. Now, coming back to our main topics, after the Fujitsu presentation, and we had that quick special guest discussion with Stefano from OSI, we started talking about how ISO 5230 maps to AI compliance. And the summary of that discussion is that there seem to be quite a few overlaps with the general approach that 5230 takes to license management. So 5230 identifies things like identify the license of the code, identify who's responsible for it, identify how you are creating a policy for it. These general approaches appear to be compatible with the big picture of AI compliance. Things like having external inquiry contacts map well. But the things that are similar, where we think, oh, that seems to have a good overlap, those things would need wordsmithing to work able to use 5230 for AI compliance. And there are points of divergence. There are things that may be completely missing from 5230 because it's dealing with open source license compliance. There may be things that are completely missing or partially missing that are necessary for AI compliance. For example, provenance questions are not necessarily addressed in the way that AI compliance may need. So in short, this took about 30 minutes going through 5230 and talking about requirements in that ISO standard. Quite a few are good matches to AI compliance matters. Quite a few of the business processes are good matches, but would need adjustment to work well with AI compliance. But some things are not good matches. Some things are missing. And that suggests that we have an opportunity to work out what those things are and what type of language could address them. If that's worked out, it gives space to potentially have a quick summary or a quick guide that discusses AI compliance from the perspective of the trusted supply chain, and it could be useful for everyone. So the decision that I brought up at the beginning of this meeting, apology for the slides, the conclusion of the previous meeting, after going through 5230, after listening to, for instance, the Fujitsu presentation today, previous presentations by ARM and Qualcomm, the conclusion of the Europe-North America workshop was to begin exploring principles for AI compliance at the next workshop. That's in early June. In practice, that means looking at the commonalities that we've discovered with 5230 and looking at the gaps that that process revealed and trying to create a list of the principles, what's missing, what works, what doesn't work, to potentially guide the next step of the discussion, edging closer to seeing if we can find a common mental model for the question of AI compliance in the trusted supply chain. So that's a summary of the meeting. That's the recap. And just to emphasize once again, you are highly recommended to watch the full meeting on YouTube. But I wanted to pause here and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, if no one has any questions, then I will just move to the
we have Steph from
any other business section. Max, I see your hand is raised, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Shane. I just have one question. For the amendment of ISO 5230, what is the scope? You know, for example, is the scope is for the organizations that use open source AI software. Is that scope, or it also include the organizations that provide, for example, open source platforms which can provide open source AI models for third-party individual users or enterprise users?
Sure, it's a very good question. So I want to clarify it with 3 points. The first point is that the AI study group is not amending, changing, or expanding 5230. So 5230, the ISO standard for open source license compliance, remains focused on that and only that. The second point is that the AI study group is not currently a work group. So its job is to discuss this topic, to study it, and to try to understand it. So right now, this study group is collecting the information and the ideas, and it's trying to see if there is a common understanding of what might work at a high level for AI compliance in the supply chain. It's not yet building anything. It's not yet writing a guide or similar. It is just at the explore and find the common approach stage. The third point is that there is a process if a common approach is found, if principles for AI compliance are described and people say, yes, that looks like the basic approach needed for my type of company in my market. If it gets to that stage, then the study group can apply to the OpenChain board to become a work group and start working on a guide based on those principles, based on the common understanding. So just to recap, we are not changing the ISO standard for license compliance. We are currently just a study group examining the challenge of AI compliance. If the study group finds a common thread, a common understanding, then it can apply to become a work group and write a guide to help with the problem.
Mhm.
In the long term, that guide hypothetically could evolve into a new industry standard, or it could evolve into training courses and so on. But the basic process is we're not touching the existing ISO standard. We're studying the problem to get a common understanding. And if we do, we can become a work group and make a guide on that topic. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, Jen, that is very clear. Thank you very much.
You are super, super welcome. Right. Any other questions or any other business? If not, we will wrap it up here with 2 points. One point is that this is a recap call looking at what happened on the workshop. But that doesn't mean that all you can do is listen. The AI mailing list is there so that we can talk through ideas, suggestions, and so on. And the recording of this call will be reviewed by our co-chairs and discussed at the next Europe, North America work group as well. So this is a two-way conversation, not a one-way conversation. And the perspectives of companies in Asia, in China, Japan, Korea, and elsewhere is super important. I apologize for the fact that I was the only party here today on the administrative side. Our co-chairs, David Marr and Matthew Crawford, on the former point, David Marr is in a completely wrong time zone. And on the latter point, Matthew had an unavoidable conflict today. I hope my summary was useful. And I went full screen to show the videos, which I don't normally do. So I give you an additional apology for some of the messing up back and forth as we tried to flip through the slides and cover everything on the call. I hope it made sense. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to the next meeting, either the North America and Europe meeting in the first week of June, or the recap meeting for Europe and Asia on the second week of June. And please join us on the mailing list for thoughts, ideas, comments, and concerns. Have a beautiful day.